I think I might be living with an SCP. To begin, I'll give you some context. I'm a 25-year-old man living in a one-bedroom apartment with my husband. For privacy purposes, I'll refer to my husband as Tom from now on. Tom and I have a lot of strong commonalities between us, but we also differ in some areas as well. The most prevalent way is most likely our sense of style. Tom is a self-described goth. He's into wearing all black, studs, boots, extravagant rings shaped like goat heads. Things like that. Whereas I'm into bright colors for everything and odd designs like a shirt with a collage print of cat heads. Tom's sense of style is also his sense of decor. He has many trinkets and decorations that match his style all over. To clarify, it's a non-issue. Although, there is one thing he has that will be the main focus of this story. The mannequin sitting in the corner. From the beginning, when I first moved in, the mannequin, whose name is Simon, kind of gave me the creeps. Don't get me wrong, I'm very into creepy things. The uncanny valley of mannequins, though, sometimes gets to me. At first, Simon had been a pile of disassembled parts cluttering the living room. So, to be kind, I gave him a nice wash and put him together. For a better picture of Simon, he's in a permanent sitting position. His arms rest on his lap in a casual manner. Because of this, I had to put him on a chair since he can't stand on his own. I thought this would make him seem less creepy, but it didn't. Now, there was a naked plastic man sitting on a chair in the corner. Still looking for remedies, I decided to put clothes on him. That's what mannequins are for, right? I outfitted him with a nice pair of slacks and an overcoat. Then I decided to add some socks and gloves, but his head was bare and his eyes still seemed to stare into the void. So I had to add a few more things. Luckily, Tom had the perfect accessories. A glittery plague doctor mask, a studded gas mask, and a big fluffy hat. With most of him covered, and the sheer ridiculousness of his outfit, Simon no longer seemed so creepy. That is, until I noticed him move. I have a keen eye for small details. I don't always notice everything, but I'm very good at spotting when something's amiss. That's how I realized that Simon's head had been pivoting, little by little, in my direction. To give you an idea of what I mean, I'll give a brief description of the room's arrangement. I station myself on one spot upon the couch. I use a very large ottoman as a table for my laptop, and I stay in front of it all day. From where I'm sitting, the corner in which Simon sits is to the left and forward, sort of diagonal from me. When I was arranging him, I didn't want to feel as if he were staring at me all the time, so I made a point to turn his head away. Currently, his head is almost facing me completely. I know what your first thoughts may be. Tom is adjusting Simon's head to prank me. But I know that isn't the case, because Tom is never out of my sight when he's home and awake. Like I said, I stay on this one part of the couch within full view of Simon, and I know Tom hasn't gone near him at all. Another point to make would be that I have seen Simon move in real time, with my own eyes. And let me tell you, it's terrifying. It's not a natural movement in any sense. It looks almost as if he's morphing instead of moving, as if his head is morphing his face into a different position rather than moving his entire head. It lasts for about a second before his face reverts back to its original position. My theory is that the morphing is how he moves, although it's very slow going. Every time he does it, his head adjusts a small amount to be facing more towards me each time. At this point, I sort of regret putting those masks on him, but I'm far too frightened to remove them now. One thing that both horrifies me and confuses me at the same time would be when I found one of his socks lying on the floor. Somehow, he managed to remove it. I don't know how, and I don't want to know. Well, it might be useful information to prepare for it happening again, or what else he might do, but I have no way of finding out. You might suggest getting rid of him, or even disassembling him, but would you want to go near him? I sure don't, and I'm not going to let Tom do it either. For now, as long as he's confined to that chair, I feel like it's safe to leave him be. It seems as though he can only move the parts of him that have joints, which means his legs are useless. And who knows, maybe he isn't malevolent, and just gets tired of looking at the same thing and being in the same position all the time. But if I find him anywhere that isn't that chair, I will throw caution to the wind and break out the hammers. Something knocks on my front door every night at 12:16 a.m. It first happened last week, Thursday, March the 22nd. It was just after midnight, and I was lying awake in bed when I first heard it. My first reaction was to look at my phone to see if someone tried calling or texting me, but there were no messages. I live alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I couldn't think of any good reason why someone would be knocking at that time, and I decided to ignore it. But then it happened again the next night at around the same time. I went downstairs this time, took a deep breath, and looked through the peephole. Nothing was there. I was getting a little weirded out at this point and decided again not to open the door. But if it happened again tomorrow, I'd be more willing to investigate. And it did happen again the next night. This time I made note of the specific time, 12:16 a.m. I was at the door in less than 10 seconds and promptly opened it. It was dark out there, and it took a moment for my eyes to adjust. Was something moving in the shadows near the bushes? No. There was nobody there. Nothing. I looked down the street in both directions, but saw no movement. It was remarkably quiet out there, but I didn't hear any footsteps. I was confused. Who was knocking on my door every night? And for the first time, I didn't think who, but what. I thought back then to the day when the knocking first began and wondered if it was related. March 22nd. I was at a funeral that day, and I think I need to write a little about it here. It was for my friend Pete, my best friend growing up. From about 8 to 15, we were inseparable. We started to lose touch 15 to 20. The last time I'd heard from him at all was 12 years ago when we were both 22. The strangest thing about his funeral was this. Nobody else was there. Just me and a priest. He was reading an incoherent Bible verse when I interrupted him and asked him where everybody else was. He paused for a moment, looked at me, then went back to reading. It felt uncomfortable. I decided to leave. So, is that significant? Did I bring some spirit back with me from the funeral home? Or was I just losing my mind? I decided I'd try and be quicker the next night. I'd wait near the door and have it opened in seconds. I wouldn't allow any time for whatever it was to get away. But even this plan failed. It must have been a mere seconds after the knocking stopped before I opened the door. What would stand before me? Was it a neighborhood kid playing a prank? A mischievous spirit? A warning to me from the supernatural? All three options seemed equally unlikely. But again, it was just empty space. Silence. I had one more plan for the next night, I slipped outside at midnight and hid behind a neighbor's car across the street. I had a very clear view of my front door and I'd be able to see whatever is knocking. I remember ducking behind the rear bumper of his car thinking, what would my neighbors think if they see me? I looked at my phone. 12:15. It would happen any second now. I looked up and down the street for movement. I couldn't see anybody. I held my phone in front of me. I watched it turn to 12:16. And still, nothing was there. I was actually slightly disappointed for a fraction of a second. But then I heard it. But I'm 100% certain as I write this, nobody was there. I was looking right at my door, but what I did see for just a moment, and I can't be certain, was a shadowy figure moving away from my house. Not human, not even something real or tangible. It was as though a shadow was moving down the sidewalk. But even I acknowledge maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I have no idea. I have tried some other things the past few nights. I stood by my front door one night and recorded the knocks, and then played the recording to my coworkers the next day. I started thinking the knocking was just in my head, but they could hear it. They were confused as to why I was making them listen to it, but they could most certainly hear it. And then, 2 nights ago, I decided to beat the knocking to the punch. I stood with my phone in front of me and opened the door at precisely 12:16, just to see what would happen. But again, there was nothing there. In fact, the knocking didn't even happen this time. So if I stood with the door open at 12:16, the knocking would be prevented. What could that mean? And here's the stranger thing. The knocking did wake me up that morning at 7:07 a.m. Why 7:07 a.m. this time? Why wouldn't the knocking happen if I stood with the door open? I have no idea. I'm lost. I'm really, really lost. Last night the knocking was back to its regular time at 12:16. This was the first time since March 22nd that I decided to just ignore it. And that leaves me here, writing this out for you all. What do I do next? Any ideas? Do I just go the rest of my life ignoring the knocking? I'm left very confused, because I can't help but think that maybe there's some sort of secret code I'm supposed to work out. There's the date, March 22nd. But also, what about the number of knocks on the door? It's always 3. Does that mean anything? The times the knocking occurs is always 12:16 and 7:07. Do those times represent something? If anyone thinks of anything, please comment below. I'll be reading and I'm open to advice. Maybe I can even try some of your ideas out tonight. At 12:16 a.m. Autopsy report. You would not believe what kind of shit I've pulled out of people. Hi, I'm Mike. I cut into dead bodies for a living. It's not exactly the kind of job that gets you laid, but it pays the bills. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Fucked up shit in dead bodies. The weirdest normal thing I've pulled out of a person was a hairball out of someone's stomach. And when I say hairball, I mean it looked like the woman had swallowed a cat. She was a suicide victim, probably bit into her hair because of anxiety. I get it. My little sister has issues with that sort of thing. Wow, off topic again. Clearly I've pounded those beers a little faster than I thought. I'm not here to talk about hairballs, no. I'm here to talk about something really weird. Over the course of 3 weeks, I got 3 cadavers that have topped the weirdness scale. I swear, everything I'm saying is true, and I got no explanation as to how the things got into their bodies, or why they were there in the first place. Forks up a vagina. Yup. Forks up a vagina. Yowza. When I uncovered the body, I made a few notes. 1, she was in her late teens, probably a senior in high school and not much more. She was probably pretty when she was alive. I'm not a freak. I think dead bodies are hideous. You really see all the flaws when someone's dead, before they're made to look pretty for the funeral. Anyway, apparently she'd just dropped during algebra with massive bleeding out of her crotch. She didn't even make it to the ambulance before they called it. They sent her down to me, in my cold, dark basement morgue, and I let my sister know I wouldn't be home until late, and she could stay at Annie's house tonight. When I saw the silvery prong starting to edge its way out of her lady spot, I wondered if she'd been stabbed and just hadn't gone for help. I've seen things along that line before. I got a hold of it and eased what appeared to be a bloodied metal dessert fork out of there. I dropped it into the tray and felt nothing but confusion. How the hell had a dessert fork gotten up there? When I opened her up, I found 9 more, all the way up to her cervix. One had even gotten trapped in her uterus. I'm thinking she might have confused it for the worst motherfucking cramps of her short life. She was on her period. When I told the investigator that cause of death was massive bleeding caused by a fork up her vag, he laughed in my face. When I showed him the evidence, though, he changed his mind. In the end, we had to put the cause of death as something self-inflicted, as there wasn't any evidence of someone forcing them up there. Honestly, though, forks. Like the ones my mom used to eat her little cheesecakes and tarts with while laughing with her friends. The second one was just as weird. Another teenage girl, around the same age. She had a more athletic build, though. Probably was in the gymnastics or swim team. She'd started vomiting blood in the parking lot after school, and a little something extra. Pins. When I cut open her stomach, it was jam-packed with sewing pins. I swear, it was bulging with them. I'd never seen so many in my life, except when I snuck into my grand's sewing room. Old women have a million pins, I swear. I can't even tell you the final count up. Far too damn many. But again, there was no evidence she had them forced down her throat. Although this is where it takes a step farther. There was no evidence she'd swallowed them at all. I had no answers. Somehow this girl had a porcupine of pins in her stomach, and I had no idea how they got in there. The hospital literally brought in 3 other dudes, some who have been doing this for a decade longer than I have. We all turned up squat. I think one of the guys went straight from the morgue to a bar. It was pretty heavy shit. But the last one is the one that's going to give me nightmares. By the time another teenage girl's body turned up, I wouldn't have batted an eyelash if I had cut her open and fucking Jennifer Lawrence turned up in there. I was done. This girl's death wasn't so bloody. She'd just asphyxiated in class. Some students claim they saw something sticking out of her mouth. But at the moment she was on the slab, there wasn't. Not until I cut open her throat, anyway. The slit I'd made split wide open and the brown-patterned head of a ball python poked out, like it was breaking free from the egg. I might have screamed like a little girl and fell back on my ass so hard I bruised my tailbone. By the time I got back up, the python had mostly squirmed free. The sucker had to be about 5 feet long, and it was now curled up across the girl's chest, looking entirely unbothered about where it just crawled free from. Nervously, I extended my arm to the scaly creature. He slithered up and made himself comfortable. I clocked out early and told the nurse I'd caught the stomach flu. I snuck out the snake in my lunchbox. Little guy was always good at not making a fuss. When I got home, my sister had cleaned up her little ritual site. But the dribbles of wax on the ground and the smell of burnt blood still lingering on the air gave away what she'd been up to. I put the python back in her tank and pulled out a few beers from the fridge. When I get back to work, I'll have to play dumb again. Not like there'd be much to prove there was a snake in the girl's throat in the first place.